Ladies and gentlemen, what a rally we are witnessing today. This is a true David versus Goliath contest on Singapore's courts. Two giants of the game, locked in one of the most anticipated matches this colony has ever seen.
He was not just a tennis pioneer, he was a sporting pioneer.
A champion who once filled the headlines.
To have a racket named after you, it would be like rackets being named after Nadal or Federer.
But Lim Bong Soo's rise began far from the courts. A civil servant who only discovered tennis at 21. Within years, he had conquered a sport once reserved for the colonial elite. Then came war, and everything changed.
During the early days of the Japanese occupation, my grandpa was rounded up by the Japanese, but grandpa was able to escape. So what happened?
Who was this unlikely champion? And how did he defy every expectation of his time?
Katie absolutely loves tennis. She would eat, sleep, dream tennis if she could. Tennis is in her blood. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's good.
But it wasn't until about 10 years ago that Charlotte discovered just how deep tennis runs in her family. All thanks to her daughter's preschool project. The assignment? Present a family member with an interesting job.
So I thought, okay, your great-grandpa, he was a tennis player. And that's something a bit different for a career.
Charlotte always knew her grandfather had played tennis. But beyond that, his story was full of gaps, missing records, and half-told tales.
My grandpa was a very private man. He never spoke about his achievements, and my family never talked about it or spoke about it.
Katie's school project felt like the moment to dig deeper. When little turned up online, Charlotte tried her luck with Singapore's National Library Board.
I emailed them and asked them, do they have any information or articles about my grandpa? And they said that there are over 2,000 articles about him. I was like, what? I was like, wow, 2,000? And I couldn't believe it. I didn't know that there was so much written about him. I found out that my grandpa played a lot of matches.
Turns out, Charlotte's grandfather, Lim Bong Soo, wasn't just a tennis player. He was one of the greatest tennis players of his time.
I told Katie about it. We were really excited. Katie started playing tennis the next year. She was very passionate about it and she did really well.
Yeah, I think you got great ground strokes. Practice more regards to the serve. So to generate more power, to pick the ball at the highest point.
Tennis clearly runs in the family. Katie's Aunt Daphne was once a junior champion. And now she's passing on that love for the game and a bit of topspin to the next generation.
So currently, Katie wants to go pro too.
Charlotte hopes finding out about her grandfather's journey will guide Katie on her own path to tennis, which is why she's determined to piece his story together, both for her daughter and for herself.
I have so many questions. When did my grandpa start learning tennis? What inspired him? How many trophies did he win? How long was his tennis career? What made him stop playing tennis? What was my grandpa like?
The best place to start? A family get-together, while Charlotte and Katie are back in Singapore for a visit. They usually live in Germany.
Looks really good. Do you want some tofu?
Yeah, one.
Wow, the aircon is so cold. It's like...
Ma, you're from a cold country and you cannot take this cold.
I'm Singaporean.
Surrounded by some of Lim's 11 children, It's the perfect opportunity to learn more about him. Though that, as it turns out, isn't so simple.
He is actually a very reserved type. Don't talk, don't share things.
No, he's actually a man of few words.
He's a very nice man. That's all.
It seems that off-court, words weren't Lim's strongest serve.
As far as children is concerned, during that period, the guys like him, he don't bother about the kids so much. We got 11 of us.
In those days, children were mostly meant to be seen, not heard. But in his own way, Lim tried to connect, swapping words for rallies.
I used to play a lot with him.
Oh, really?
Every morning?
Yeah.
Every morning he would come and wake me up. Oh, you done this, But I don't.
Why? What do you mean? Because
I do like the sun.
okay, I get it.
They train very seriously. In the morning, 6 o'clock, ask you to wake up to run in Farrer Park.
It's interesting to hear that he had such passion for tennis that it wasn't just the boys, but also the girls. He probably wanted to be able to chat with them about tennis. Did you know that Grandpa was a famous tennis player?
No, we don't actually know. It's only we know that he's good because there are so many trophies. But he's not the show-off type.
Did you guys have to clean his trophies?
Every year you clean the trophy, right?
Yeah, I will polish the whole cabinet. 2 cabinets. I think you have easily 50 trophies, easily. But some are lost during the period. I think the Japanese occupation period might have lost about maybe 15.
The family might not recall the details of his career, but there's one haunting episode they've never forgotten from the Japanese years in Singapore. February 1942. The Japanese have taken Singapore. Within days, chaos descends. Violence erupts in the streets. The Chinese are singled out, suspected of being the most likely to resist, with memories of the Sino-Japanese War still fresh. Across the island, men are rounded up, inspected, and may never return. Among them was Lim Bong Soo. For thousands, this was the end of the line. But fate took an unexpected turn for Lim.
According to my family, my grandpa was able to leave because of a letter or a pass that allowed him to be excused. Did Grandma tell you what was in the letter?
No, she's even unable to tell what is this letter all about. But it's a pass to get out.
That letter or pass saved Lim's life. But what it said and where it went remain a mystery. Was it a political connection, a favor owed, or a secret that had to be hidden, even from his own family? For Charlotte, it's one more reason to keep digging, to uncover the truth for herself. But what she finds is not what she expects.
Wow.
The letter that saved Singaporean tennis player Lim Bong Soo from the Japanese during World War II remains a mystery. To find answers, Charlotte is looking further back to the years before the war, when her grandfather's name filled the national papers.
Lim Bong Soo, Singapore Open Singles Champion from 1930 to 1935, All-Malayan Singles Champion from 1931 to 33 and 1935. Hong Kong all-newcomers singles champion in 1929 and Chinese national champion in 1931, a symbol of perfection on the tennis greens. Nobody dared dispute that. Till today, nobody does. Wow. Reading that was like, there's so much feeling and emotion. I never knew my grandpa won so many matches and did so much for Singapore. It brings tears to your eyes.
Lim's triumphs in Hong Kong and China showed he was more than a local champion. He was a figure of pride for the Straits Chinese. Charlotte turns to the Straits Chinese Annual, a yearbook of the community's leading figures. Inside, she uncovers something rare, her grandfather's story in his own words.
This is interesting. It says here, the voyage from Singapore to Hong Kong lasted about 4.5 days. The trip was pleasant throughout, except on the second day when the writer had a slight experience of mal de mer. I never knew that my grandpa was, into writing. I didn't know he was interested in anything like that.
The documents Charlotte uncovers reveal just how dominant Lim was in his day.
There was a big crowd in attendance, estimated in the neighborhood of 1,000. In their excitement, some of the spectators interfered by blocking and shouting during the progress of the play.
The next discovery is even more astonishing. His name reappears decades later in the memoirs of Singapore's former president, S.R. Nathan.
Because I once acted as ball boy to Lim Bong Soo, who represented Singapore. I never knew that my grandpa was that big known a tennis player in Singapore.
It's not just his fame that stuns Charlotte, but how quickly he climbed to it.
He started maybe in his early 20s, and in a few years, he just rose really fast in the tennis circuit.
Digging deeper, Charlotte discovers that her grandfather's turning point came in 1929, when Lim, only 2 years married and father to a newborn, stepped onto the court to face Singapore's reigning champion, Khoo Hoi Hai, in a match that would define his career.
So there's a photo of Grandpa with Khoo Hoi Hai.
To understand what really happened that day, Charlotte turns to someone who knows this story inside out. Researcher and sports history buff, Abhishek Mehrotra. He's written a feature-length article on Lim for Singapore's National Library and now edits an online publication. But before anything else, he sets the scene for her.
Tennis was played in very exclusive clubs, very genteel environment, very polite clapping. Not so noisy, except when it got really exciting. But that also sort of speaks to tennis's root as a very sort of elite, upper-class sport.
In the 1900s, tennis courts were mostly located inside European-only clubs, like the Singapore Cricket Club and the Tanglin Club. Top players were Europeans, and the Japanese, whose tennis scene was rising quickly. Outside the colonial elite and rising Japanese players, one other name commanded attention: Malaysian Khoo Hoi Hai. A teenage tennis prodigy from Penang, Khoo was already racking up wins by the age of 16.
And in fact, I came across a report which talked about how Mr. Lim Bong Soo watched a match in which Khoo was featuring, and he was quite inspired by that. And that sort of led him to first pick up tennis.
But the two couldn't be more different. Khoo was the golden boy, strong, seasoned, the pride of the courts. Lim? He had none of that.
He's repeatedly described as a man of small stature, who did not have a lot of powerful strokes, could not finish rallies and points and matches easily.
From 1926 to 1928, Lim chased Khoo's shadow. Like the perpetual challenger in a video game boss fight, he came close, closer than anyone had in years, but just couldn't win. But on April 24th, 1929, the stage was set for something different. The location, the Straits Chinese Recreation Club. The favorite, Koo, unbeaten and unshaken. The challenger, a relative newcomer with everything to prove.
It was probably one of the most anticipated matches of that era. The first set begins with Koo absolutely dominant. Your granddad, it seems like, is overwhelmed by the occasion. Mr. Koo basically won every single game.
Koo storms through the first set, 6 games to love. In the second, he's quickly up 4-2.
He was leading 4-2, so everyone thought, okay, this match is pretty much done. But that is when your granddad somehow gets the energy and starts hitting his ground strokes more and more consistently. To the point where he draws level. But at one point, Koo actually has match point, and he's an ace away from winning the match.
Koo Hoi Hai is 1 point from victory. All he has to do is serve the ball past Lim, and it's game over.
He does not serve that ace. Your granddad gets the ball back into play. And eventually, Koo hits the ball long. He loses the point. So your granddad eventually ended up winning that second set 8-6. At that time, there used to be no tie breaks. So now we are tied at 1 set all. Third set, it starts off with your granddad clearly being the fresher of the 2 players. And Koo is visibly tiring, he's exhausted. The score is 5-0. But Koo was champion for a reason as well. And he wins 2 games in a row. But Lim holds his nerve. And serves out the match to become champion.
Wow, okay.
So it was basically that match that began his journey into becoming like a local legend and become the leading tennis player of that age. And probably the best tennis player or one of the top 3 tennis players Singapore has ever produced.
I was just so proud of my grandpa. I was so impressed to see like my grandpa had the endurance to go through that and not to feel like, I'm not that skilled. They wrote that he was also shorter, smaller, less experienced.
Even more astonishing, Tiger Woods swung clubs at 2. Serena Williams picked up a racket at 3. Lim Bong Soo, he started tennis at 21 and somehow still caught up. Abhishek has long wondered, how did a late starter like Lim climb so quickly to the top of Singapore's tennis world? To find the answer, he begins where every story begins, at the start. How How did Lim Bong Soo rise so fast? Sports journalist Abhishek Mehrotra is helping Charlotte uncover how his rapid ascent began.
Born in Singapore in January 1901, son of a government contractor, Bong Soo never saw his father because he lost him when he was only 1 year old.
We don't know what his father died of, but raised by his mother along with one older brother, Lim still found his footing and his way into some of Singapore's best schools.
Bong Soo went to St. Joseph's School for the primary and later joined the Anglo-Chinese school.
By the 1920s, Lim was working as a civil servant in the colonial treasury, a steady job that gave little hint of the sporting path to come.
I mean, this is very interesting. Lim Bong Soo made up his mind to take up tennis when he witnessed the first All-Malaya Tennis Championship in 1921. His late brother Lim Seng Kiang offered to coach him. Across a section of the former polo ground at Balestier Road, and coaching sessions began. Maybe his brother was himself a player at some level.
It's unclear whether his brother was much of a player. What's certain is he got Lim hooked. That moment marked the beginning of a double life. Civil servant by day, secret tennis student after work.
This was actually the norm at the time. Tennis players were not very well paid, so all of them, unless they came from very moneyed backgrounds, virtually all of them held full-time jobs.
Balancing a full-time job with training was no small feat. Yet, in 1925, Lim joined the Straits Chinese Recreation Club. And in the same year, he won its singles championship.
So the Straits Chinese Recreation Club was founded in 1884. It's formed along very similar lines to the Singapore Cricket Club. So the Straits Chinese were one of the first amongst the local population to adopt a lot of British customs and traditions. And as in all other colonized societies, amongst the local upper class, there's always that aspiration to be considered as part of that same society of the occupying colonial power. So by the early 1900s, you have this sort of mushrooming of clubs in Singapore.
With the rise of new clubs came a flood of tournaments, many of which Lim later came to dominate.
So to me, it really shows that this was a person who was born to play the game. He picks up the sport, and within a year, he's already challenging at the club level, and within a few years of that, he's challenging at the national level.
So what was his secret weapon? Not a coach or elite club training, but something far more solitary.
He persevered by practicing assiduously, and in his spare time studied books on the art of playing tennis written by Tilden, René Lacoste, and Cochet.
It seems for Lim, greatness began in the margins of books. But can you really learn to play like a champion just by reading? Abhishek has teamed up with tennis coach Darren to see if words on a page can really shape a champion.
So it seems like Lim Bong Soo came across this book by Bill Tilden, who was one of the early tennis greats. He wrote tips and techniques for folks looking to pick up tennis and those further along in their career. I think the book was published in 1925. So we are going to try out some of those tips that Lim himself might have tried out a century ago.
To get a real feel for how the game was played back then, Abhishek's brought along a vintage racket, the kind Lim himself might have used.
The face is really small.
Yeah.
So I guess you got to be really precise, huh?
Yeah.
With where you're meeting the ball.
A century ago, rackets were carved from solid wood, almost twice as heavy as today's graphite models. And the strings, not high-tech synthetics, but cowgut. That meant less power, less spin, less control. playing may have felt like swatting the ball with a chopping board. Before developing any killer shots, Lim would have had to start with the basics. How to hold the thing. Turns out that is anything but simple.
The forehand drive grip is best acquired by holding the racket as if it was standing on the edge of the frame. The thumb and the wrist are behind the handle and the grip is tight at the impact of the ball on the strings. The line of the arm, wrist and racket is straight. For someone who has no idea of the game itself, yeah, this would just be Greek for them.
The handle pointing towards you.
Okay.
Then shake hands with it. So with your right hand, yeah. This is more or less exactly the same as it is now.
Yeah.
Then maybe you can try like the forehand drive like you were speaking about. That's not bad.
Not bad.
Yeah.
It actually, apart from the heaviness of it, which I must say you get used to it after a while.
I see.
It feels quite nice actually.
Really?
Yeah.
It all seems pretty straightforward, until suddenly it isn't.
Shots are all hit on the same face of the racket.
But I can't, how do you get it on the same face, the forehand?
And the backhand.
Yeah, so the forehand is this face, but then backhand is like this, sir.
I'm guessing so. Let's try.
No,
maybe
that can't be right. There's this, it doesn't feel natural at all.
Not every idea aged well, but many of Tilden's other lessons still form the backbone of modern tennis. Of course, tennis itself has changed dramatically, thanks in no small part to the rackets. Modern tennis is built on power and pace, but in the 1920s, it was closer to chess. Patience, placement, and waiting for your opponent to crack. And learning all that without a coach?
If Lim Bong Soo did not have any professional help, and this is all he used to teach himself the game and finesse it, then that makes it quite astonishing.
However he managed it, Lim ruled Singapore's courts for over a decade. And then, nothing. His name vanished from the headlines. What happened? And why does one of Singapore's greatest players barely register in memory today?
Hi there.
Hello.
Good to
How are
see
you?
Again.
Hi, Nick. How are you?
Abhishek. I'm good.
Abhishek is at Sports Singapore to meet Dr. Nick Aplin and Teresa Teo Gutenzon, the duo curating a new exhibit that could finally restore Lim's place in history.
Well, we have a little surprise for you.
Okay.
Something related to Lim Bong Soo.
Oh, wow, okay.
A very precious find.
Can't wait.
Let me open this up. So, we have here a brochure showing the Lim Bong Soo special and the Lim Bong Soo racket. So, these rackets were named after Lim Bong Soo.
Yep.
To have a racket named after you, it would be like rackets being named after Nadal or Federer.
In 1936, Lim's fame reached new heights. A British firm, Sykes, later Slazenger, then Dunlop, released 2 rackets bearing his name. They sold for 20 and 27 Straits dollars, the equivalent of about $250 today. Not exactly pocket change, and proof of just how celebrated he was. The rare brochures uncovered by Sports SG's deputy director are now a centerpiece of their collection.
It was found by chance. We have a storeroom which includes many artifacts which have been collected and left over the years. But it's a challenge because when the items were put in there was no great system.
Right.
You know, it's not like they were all in labeled boxes or anything like that.
Like serendipity, basically.
Yes.
Nick and Teresa are now on a mission, hunting down photos, trophies, and scraps of memory that can bring Lim back into Singapore's sporting story.
Part of what I do is designed to discover, to unveil people from the past whose names have drifted away. It's important to sustain the stories of Lim Bong Soo because he is a fundamental part of the sporting culture. Telling stories about sportsmen is very, very important, not just for the entertainment, the information, but because it reflects the nature of society. If you don't understand your society, then it's difficult to make progress.
Nick and his colleague Shad are back looking for artifacts in the storeroom, which is less an archive and more of a lucky dip. These shelves are filled with Singapore's sporting past, waiting to be rediscovered.
It's very much like one of the old-time archaeologists looking through a series of artifacts and trying to make sense of what the place was like, what sport was like in Singapore.
Hidden somewhere among 4,000 carefully wrapped artifacts lies their prize, a trophy said to have once belonged to Lim.
What have we got here? Well, I don't think any luck there. This might be one. Shall we have a look? We were fortunate. Just the other week, we recovered these two trophies here. These are actually rather grand trophies, silver-plated. The one on the far side actually includes Lim Bong Soo's name 3 times. This was the Bancroft Cup.
The other trophy, the Singapore Open, is also etched with Lim's name. Precious relics from a time when local winners were rare.
We have a closer look. Singapore Lawn Tennis Association Hard Court Championships. Unfortunately, no date. I don't think this is a Lim Bong Soo trophy, unfortunately. I'm a bit disappointed, I'll be honest.
It's a setback, but not the end of the search. Back at his desk, Nick digs deeper into the archives, and what he's found is bigger than any trophy. A missed chance that could have changed Lim's story forever.
He received an offer, which would have been a wonderful opportunity.
It really gives you goosebumps to think about that sequence of events.
I never knew that.
By the mid-1930s, Lim Bong Soo is at the peak of his career, a tennis legend of his time. And in 1936, a remarkable opportunity comes up.
I'm reading a very interesting article about Lim Bong Soo. He received an offer to go and play at Wimbledon, which would have been a wonderful opportunity.
But Lim said no. Wimbledon was tennis's biggest stage. Turning it down was the kind of decision that has left both Nick and Abhishek scratching their heads.
He said he was scared of the voyage from Singapore to the UK at that time, which on ships of the era could feasibly take over a month.
He would have been away from his family for a long time. He may not have perceived that the rewards for going would have been significant enough for the expenditure of time.
In 1933, Wimbledon was all prestige, no paycheck. Prize money didn't arrive until 1968. And, side note, equal pay didn't turn up until 2007. But what might have changed if Lim had gone and proved himself on that stage?
If he had gone, if he had actually performed well, that would have been a very, very big deal. Both his fame and the amount of money that he stood to make would have been significantly higher.
Ultimately, no one knows why he turned Wimbledon down. But just a few years later, Lim made another surprising choice that would alter his legacy forever. He took on a coaching job. By today's standards, no big deal. Back then, it branded him a professional, and that was a dirty word in tennis.
The reason for that was that sports like tennis, cricket, they were rooted in Victorian norms and ideas. It is not gentlemanly to make money from sport. It was the preserve of upper-class gentlemen who did it as a hobby, as a passion. But the reactions were very sort of snooty.
that professionalism should be creeping into Malayan sports is a thing the majority of us would hardly credit, and it was particularly disturbing to hear that the finest lawn tennis player in the country had decided to join the ranks of the paid last week.
Lim was the only Singaporean player at the time to turn pro. His decision came with consequences. Turning professional shut him out of the amateur tournaments that had built his reputation. What had Lim been thinking?
Lim Bong Soo might have gone professional for a bunch of reasons, one of which could have been his frustration at his fortune not being commensurate with his fame.
He was the region's top player, but the fame came without fortune. Endorsements were rare, prize money unheard of. And with 3 children at home at the time, Lim may have had less of a choice than it seemed. Coaching was one way to make tennis pay.
I believe if Lim Bong Soo had decided not to turn professional, his reputation would have been enhanced, without doubt. There's no reason to suggest why he wouldn't have carried on winning and seeing his name in the newspaper and inspiring youngsters to play.
Turning pro cost Lim his reputation. But the real test was yet to come. War. Suddenly, the game was no longer about winning matches, but staying alive. In the Lim family, one story has always lingered. Somehow, Lim was spared by the Japanese. But no one knows why. To look for answers, Charlotte heads to the former Ford Factory Museum with her 90-year-old aunt, Josephine, who was just 8 when war broke out.
The time of war is scared. Wartime.
What do you remember seeing or hearing during that time?
All the sound, like bomb the sound.
Yeah,
Very
bombing
loud.
sound, very loud.
Josephine remembers those early days as a blur of fear and hunger. Like everyone else, the family was just trying to survive.
Grandma was pregnant, is it? Was going to, yeah, was going to deliver. Was it hard to find enough food?
People no food, no. No even bread to eat.
The Japanese occupation was a very hard, very painful time.
Amid hunger and fear came something even darker. The Japanese singled out Chinese Singaporeans, herding them into mass screenings. Many were executed in what would later be called the Suk Ching Massacre.
The Japanese officer will say, those with spectacles, stand this up. Those without spectacles, stand this up. Those with spectacles are all the learned fellows, so they take them away, slaughtered. Those who are government servants working for British, raise your hands. So they raise their hand. Slaughtered.
Yeah, I never knew that.
It's estimated that close to 50,000 Singaporeans were killed in the massacre. Lim could easily have been among them, if not for a mysterious document that somehow spared his life.
I think our family was very fortunate to be spared. Yeah, Auntie? Yeah.
What happened at that encounter remains unclear. But Charlotte discovers the family was treated differently after it.
The Japanese are very good to us. The Japanese every day also came to our house. Take care of my mother. They gave us food, everything, rice, what. Very good. We don't suffer.
It's really strange that the Japanese would treat my family differently and give us special treatment. So for Grandpa, during the Japanese occupation, was he still playing tennis?
Yeah,
Yeah.
He play with all the Japanese. Some of the Japanese, they prefer the tennis game. They like him. Every day go and play.
Tennis during wartime? With Japanese occupiers? For Lim, the court may have been more than a game. It may have been his lifeline.
The fact that Lim Bong Soo was actively playing tennis during the Japanese occupation suggests one or two different theories. One is it was part of an agreement. You must play, you must coach our players, and we will leave you alone. The other could be simply they respected and acknowledged the standard of his play and felt this is somebody who's a little bit special, we'll leave him alone. I have a theory that he was very well known and respected by the Japanese players in the 1920s and the 30s. And that information would have been transferred to the people who were in charge of the occupation. But also, the Japanese encouraged sport in Singapore during the occupation because they thought that this would be a very good way of harmonizing the population.
Officially, the Japanese encouraged sport to win hearts and minds. Unofficially, maybe a general's love of tennis was the reason Lim survived.
Tennis saved my family's life. They traded my grandpa's life for tennis lessons. That's what we think. I think he had to do it because his family's life is in the hands of the Japanese.
I would love for it to be true. It really gives you goosebumps to think about that sequence of events. Lim Bong Soo is picked out, he takes out his letters, a decision maker who has the power of life and death over him reads it and realizes that this is someone who is a sporting legend in Singapore. So to think about that close shave with death, which unfortunately befell so many other fellow Singaporeans, it really gives you pause for thought and just makes you, think about the strange ways in which life can turn and twist.
Among the Japanese documents issued during the occupation are labor passes, slips of paper that in 1942 could mean the difference between going to work or being taken away. And work passes were only the beginning.
Here they have work pass issued by Masaji Hirayama of the Public Welfare Department Sports Division. Oh, they did allow some sports people to travel. It seemed like it was common for the Japanese to issue these documents and armbands. That document that my family was talking about could be an ID for my grandpa. That could be the ID that saved my grandpa's life.
An armband, an ID, a letter tucked away. Whatever it was, it vanished with the Japanese surrender, along with countless other wartime papers. But history marched on. Singapore began its long road to independence. And Lim?
Within a decade after the Second World War, Lim Bong Soo is back to participating in tournaments.
Despite suffering several strokes from high blood pressure, Lim kept returning to the court, still competing into his 70s. He mentored younger players and stayed devoted to the game, even as his name slowly faded from memory. On May 6, 1992, he passed away at the age of 92. Now it's his family who are determined to keep that legacy alive. After years of keeping his trophies safe and polished, the family are entrusting them to Nick and Teresa.
Nice to see you again.
What a wonderful selection of memorable trophies have brought us here today. In the future, the whole of the museum is going to be restored And it is our intention, when the new museum comes along, that we will have a special display on a grander scale. And then we hope that you will all be able to come and see and take pictures with father or grandfather's trophies.
Seeing all the trophies being displayed, I felt really honored and proud of my grandpa, and they did some justice for him.
He was not just a tennis pioneer, he was a sporting pioneer. It's an amazing story of this person who takes up the sport at what one would call an advanced age for a professional and really rises up through the ranks so quickly and stamps his authority on the game across the region. This unassuming Chinese man who becomes so good that he's eventually beating the colonial masters. In a place like Singapore, which is changing all the time, stories like Lim Bong Soo and other sporting legends of the time provide some of those markers that can really help us trace that identity going back all the way.
If my grandpa was alive today, I think he would have been really excited to coach Katie to wake her up every day and get her playing tennis, which she already loves. So I think they would make an amazing pair.